He was just incredible in the Karate Kid movies as well as Happy Days and MASH and the other things he's been involved in. It just makes you appreciate how good an actor that he was, considering all those tough things he went through as a child.
This is Legends with Bevo, thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg and Renelec Electrical Services. And now here's your host, Bevo.
Welcome to another edition of Legends with Bevo, and boy, oh boy, what a privilege it is today to be joined by Kevin Derrick. He's a director of More Than Miyagi. It's a documentary about Pat Morita, of course, who played Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid movies. Kevin, great to have you on the show. What an absolute thrill.
Thank you. I'm glad to be on. Thank you so much.
Now, we saw the jovial side to Pat on all the Karate Kid movies and, Happy Days, and also on MASH that he's been involved in. But there's quite a dark side to Pat that people may or may not know about him. And I'll just read a quote. More Than Miyagi left behind a painfully autobiographical record of a much too brief life. Now, that's pretty dark sort of stuff there. Tell us more about this.
Right. He did actually in 1996, he started writing. I think Evelyn, his third wife, was, told him, why don't you start writing your manuscript? And so he started writing in 1996, but, unfortunately, he couldn't finish it. And he told Evelyn, if anything were to happen to me, try to finish this and produce it, do a documentary, do a feature, write it as a book or something. And in that manuscript, he describes in details his experience in the sanitarium from when he was 2 to 11. And then, back in the 30s, they really didn't have a cure for tuberculosis. So they would put him in a full body cast from shoulder down to his knees. And they would have him lay down in the sun all day long. And that was the treatment. Can you imagine being a 2-3-year-old kid and laying out in the sun the whole time? So, and then when he was cured, I think he was 12 years old, the war breaks out. And then the FBI comes and picks him up from the hospital and takes him to the internment camps. And at the internment camps, he's been in the hospital for so long that he doesn't speak Japanese. He speaks English. But when he gets to the internment camp, his parents only speak Japanese. So they weren't able to communicate. For a kid, he's experienced a lot of bad things. And, after the war, there's a discrimination that went on. And, there's just so many things. This would make a great Netflix series. There's so much detail in his manuscript.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. It's amazing to think that he was so amazing, or use the word amazing a lot here, but this is sort of how I feel about him, because he was just incredible in the Karate Kid movies as well as Happy Days and MASH and the other things he's been involved in. It just makes you appreciate how good an actor that he was, considering all those tough things he went through as a child.
Right. Absolutely. But he got nominated for something else too. I think it was a television series that he was working on. So he's won a lot of awards.
And the idea behind the documentary, where did this sort of come about, and what was your relationship like with Pat?
Okay. I was doing a documentary called The Real Miyagi. It was about my karate teacher. I've been in martial arts all my life. And my karate teacher, he's the one who did all the stunts for Pat Morita, all the Karate Kid films, and O'Hara series and all that stuff. So I knew Pat through my karate teacher. So when we were doing the documentary, we went and interviewed Pat Morita's wife, Evelyn. And then after the interview, she was telling us all these stories about the internment. I didn't know that much about Pat. And that was the first time I got a look inside, Pat's history. And Evelyn said, he saw his father die in front of his eyes and, tuberculosis and all that stuff. And all those stories stuck with me. And then a year later, when the documentary, The Real Miyagi, came out on Netflix, she called us to congratulate us. And I said, that's the time to head her up. So I said, hey, Evelyn, what do you think if we do a documentary on Pat? And then at first she said, I'm thinking his story would be better told in a feature, a biopic. I said, well, sure, but maybe we can start as a documentary. And then once it grows momentum and, it'll be easier for us to get the funding to do a feature, then we'll do a feature. She said, okay, that's a great idea. So that's how that got started. And that was back in 2016. So we've been working on this for 4 or 5 years now.
And your journey as the director and producer, tell us more about that and some of the other movies that you've been involved in.
how far back do you want me to go? Yeah. But, just the past 10 years, I've been involved in documentaries. Before, when I went to Columbia College, I started doing like low budget narratives. Like my first film was called The Ultimate Game. It was an action adventure film, low budget, but then like just 10 years ago, we started doing documentaries. The first one was everything that I do is kind of related to either Karate Kid or martial arts somehow. So the first one was called The Real Karate Kids. It was about the journey of 5 kids who go to nationals. And then it was the Real Miyagi. And then I did another one last year that's called Make America Laugh Again. That's like about Middle Eastern comedians and all the stereotyping and all that stuff that happened. And then we did this one. But I've been involved in filmmaking most of my life. I run a film festival in Orange County. And it's funny that we honored John Avildsen there a year before he passed away. John Avildsen's the director of The Karate Kid. So we honored him, and that it's funny. I saw The Karate Kid in the same theater, then I honored him in a Lifetime Achievement Award 30 years later.
Oh, how
so
cool.
It's just weird how this kind of stuff is working out. But yeah, and then I went to school, did some films, and here we are with Pat Morita, and we'll see where this journey takes me after this.
And I've always got an interest as well in, people that direct and produce, whether they have any interest in acting. Was there ever a part of you where you thought about being an actor yourself?
That's funny you mentioned that. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because people, when I was younger, I was kind of decent looking and stuff, and people say, hey, why don't you try acting? But I did. But when the camera's pointed at, I'm a very shy person, and when the camera's pointed at me, I can't say anything. So I just realized that, I'm better off behind the camera, and I think that's where I excelled, behind the camera. I tried it, but it just wasn't my thing. So.
And we're really thinking of you guys over there in America. I mean, how's it affected the film industry, and how, I guess, does COVID make it with regards to making documentaries and movies over there? Like, what's the situation like?
It's much harder for me if I want to make another documentary, and if this COVID is still going on. A lot of these actors or whoever that we want to interview, they're less likely to do, have you, invite us to their house and stuff like that. So it makes it a little bit harder for this Pat Morita thing. We were finished before the COVID started. So we had done all the shooting, thank goodness, before the whole COVID. And then this whole period of the COVID thing, I was sitting home and doing the editing. So it worked out perfectly. But in terms of the next project, I'm just kind of worried, like, what are we going to do? So you never know. But it's definitely much harder now to do a project.
Well, hopefully with the vaccines, that might make things a bit easier for you guys. Fingers crossed.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. And aside from the Mr. Miyagi that we saw on The Karate Kids, was there a similarity between Pat and that character that he played where he was so jovial and we saw that funny side to him?
The only thing that I would say was similar to the Miyagi character was his personality, right? His humor. That's the first thing that I talk to with people. The first thing they say is that, when you met him, try to make you laugh and smile. And so that aspect of him, I would say was similar. But in terms of, and also the internment camps, I think Mr. Miyagi had, the same background as what Pat had. But in terms of karate and he didn't have an accent at all. And he didn't know any karate. So other than that, I would say, yeah,
And we saw the close relationship between Ralph Macchio and Pat on the Karate Kid movies. And obviously now with Cobra Kai, which I'm personally loving and everyone around the world is as well, which we'll get to in a moment. But was there a relationship between the two offset as well that was really close that we saw on the Karate Kid?
From what I gather, their relationship was more of a professional rather than like a personal, because Ralph Macchio lives in New York, Pat lived in Vegas, Zabka lives in LA, so it was kind of hard for them to, get together. So I remember Pat in his interviews and the pictures that I saw when he would to go shoot in New York or he would shoot in LA, they would get together. But in terms, I think it was more professional than anything. As Zabka said, and Ralph said that, on occasions like, holidays and stuff, Pat would call us up and, talk to us. But I don't think it was as close as you would think it was. And last thing that Ralph told me is that the year before he died, they honored him for a Lifetime Achievement Award in New York. And he said that was the moment that I finally got to tell him everything that I wanted to tell him on stage.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
I think that's available somewhere on YouTube or something. But yeah, that's basically it.
And tell us about Pat, something that we may not know about him as well, Kevin, the man that you know, or you knew, I should say.
Something that you guys don't know about. Well, the people who don't know anything about him, everything in the documentary is going to be new to them. Wow, this is great. I didn't know any of this. But the people who knew and they followed his career, they mainly knew him as the Karate Kid, like I did, the Mr. Miyagi. To me, the surprise was his drinking problem, and I didn't know how severe it was. I mean, talking to the assistant, she said, he was drinking every day. His drinking started when he was 12 years old. His father and his uncle were making bootleg sake and internment camps and keeping everybody messed up. So can you imagine him starting at 12 until the end of his life? He was drinking every day. He used to put vodka in his coffee.
Wow.
And no one knew that he was drunk. When every film that you see him, he was drunk. But you can't really tell.
Wow.
The director didn't know. No one knew anything. But when it started showing up, was a year before he passed away, because as you get older, he tried to quit drinking, and he got a job in one of Las Vegas, some nightclub. I don't remember what it was, but he was like 10 feet away from the bar. So he was sober for like 3 months. And then when he got that job, since he was so close, how people, they come and offer him drinks and stuff. So he started drinking again and it got really worse. And then he relapsed and he started doing stupid stuff. And that's where it went downhill and led to his demise. But,
so the alcohol was sort of led to, his death in the end. That was one of the main causes.
Right. That's what it was. It was alcohol. I'm surprised that he lived as long as he did, drinking every day.
Yeah, you're right. It's quite staggering when you think about that. But I guess, not that I'm making an excuse for him, but what he went through, in his childhood was absolutely, horrific. So I can sort of see why people do turn to alcohol with these situations. But I suppose, and nowadays it's great that there's more support out there. We just wish that he could have had that support, don't we?
Right. Everyone in any family can relate to, like my uncle, I have so many relatives that they have the same problem. So it's something you can relate to. I mean, if it was me and I had gone through all the stuff that Pat gone through, God, I don't know what I would have done. Maybe I would have done something worse. Who knows? But, it's justifiable to me that he suffered this much that he had to do something to mask all that stuff. So,
And people may not know this as well. This is something that I sort of found from doing my research before chatting to yourself, is that he was actually involved as a stand-up comedian. I suppose we saw that jovial side to him in The Karate Kid, but was he like that a bit as well in Happy Days and MASH? Because that was before my time. I was a bit younger.
Yeah, I was 10 when Happy Days came out. I mean, I grew up watching Happy Days, and for me, it was such a strange feeling that the strangest feeling for me was Marion Ross, when we went and interviewed her. When I stepped into her house, I felt like I'm stepping into like the Happy Days set. And you know how all the kids, Ralph Malph, Fotsy, and Richie, they go and sit down and have cookies and lemonade and all that stuff. So we went to her house and she had actually made us homemade cookies and lemonade.
Oh.
So we sat down with her, and it was just like a fabulous feeling for her. It was weird. You grew up with these people, and then 30 years later, you're at their home having cookies, and it was just weird. But it was a great feeling, though. And all of them have been nice. They were everyone that we interviewed, Ralph, Zabka, everyone from Happy Days. They were such a nice people, all of them.
And so Pat was sort of a bit of a funny sort of character on Happy Days as well, or was it more of a serious side to him on that?
He was. He came in actually in the third season of Happy Days. After the second season, they were thinking of canceling Happy Days because they would refer to a person named Arnold, but you would never see anyone, and it was just, you would hear a voice in the kitchen or something like that. So in the third season, they decided to hire someone, and the producer already knew Pat from prior things that he worked on. So he said, you don't need to audition, just come and you have the job. So at the third season is when they came in and they changed the format. They went from like shooting it on film, they went to shooting it on video, and it was live in front of an audience. And that's when it started picking up, and they did, because I don't know, like 10 more seasons after that. But the bad thing was, it wasn't bad for Pat, but he got offered his own show, Mr. T and Tina, because of the success of Happy Days. And so he couldn't turn it down, and he was the lead. So he switched over to that one sitcom. But that sitcom was ahead of his time. I mean, back then, seeing a Japanese lead, and I don't think when it was 10 years after, 20 years after the war, I don't think people were ready to see a Japanese lead in a sitcom. So unfortunately, that didn't work out. They only shot like 6 episodes and aired 3 episodes. And after that, he couldn't come back to Happy Days because they already got another Arnold to replace him.
Oh, no.
So then at that point, like he was in a bad position. So he ended up going back to Hawaii, and he lived back there. And then I don't want to give the whole story away.
No, that's fine. Hey, before we let you go, I mentioned before Cobra Kai, 3 seasons in so far. It's going gangbusters, and they're always Mr. Miyagi's always brought up, which he should be, on the show. We've got Miyagi-Do for those people out there that have been watching Cobra Kai. What's your take on the first few seasons, and how do you feel as in being a Karate Kid fan versus the Cobra Kai series?
I love the Cobra Kai series. I think they did a great job. I think it's a show that you can, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you can enjoy because they reminisce all the stuff that happened in the Karate Kid. And at the same time, if you're a young kid, and if you have kids, which I have a kid that's my son's 20 years old, my daughter's 18 years old, they can sit and actually enjoy the story with me because it focuses on a lot of teenagers and stuff like that. So it's good for both generations to watch this. And a lot of people that were in their teens and 20s, they weren't really familiar with Pat Morita and Mr. Miyagi, which I think is nice that Ralph said, he tries to incorporate Pat's legacy into all the episodes. I think season 3, they went back to Okinawa and they had a show just dedicated to Pat and stuff. So yes, it's nice that they're keeping Pat Morita and Mr. Miyagi in people's minds.
Yeah, one thing I love about it is how you're spot on there, what you've just said, well said with that, but also how they brought the old characters back. That's what Elizabeth Shue and you mentioned before, the Japanese one they brought back. Obviously, Ralph's arch nemesis from, I think it was the second one in Japan. And I just love how they brought all these old characters back in, and it's just fantastic. Right. So Kreese, of course, as well. And
Ali, for me, was the big surprise. I didn't think that she would come back, but I guess with all the success and all that stuff, I think with the success of the Karate Kid when it came out, it appeared to me that all the girls that were in there tried to distance themselves from the Karate Kid so they don't get pigeonholed like Pat Morita. But it's just lately that you're seeing. I mean, they're all successful now, and I think because of that they're successful, like Hilary Swank and all that stuff. I don't think if no one knew that. The Hilary Swank's first movie was the next Karate Kid. I mean, that was her first movie she ever did.
Well, Kevin, Derek, thank you so much today for joining us on Legends with Bevo. This has been an absolute pleasure. Love the documentary, and hopefully we'll see some more documentaries, or like you mentioned before, maybe a Netflix series about Pat, because that would be wonderful. And keep up the great work, mate.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Sounds so good.